Do you know how many different British accents there actually are? And do you know the benefits of actually exploring these different accents? And if you're going to do that, which one should you spend your time learning? Well, today you're going to find out the answer to all of these questions. All right, mate, and welcome to the BritSpeakPod, the podcast designed to help you understand British life, British culture, and of course, British English. So, let's get cracking. Hey up, mate. How are you doing today? Yeah, I'm not too bad. Thanks for asking, and welcome to episode 002 of the BritSpeakPod. If you're new around here, my name is Dan. Nice to meet you. Do me a favour, subscribe to this podcast, wherever you get your podcasts from. And if you're not new here, welcome back. It's nice to see you again. Today, we are talking all about the British accent. Well, kind of. We're talking about why there's no such thing as a British accent. Every day on Instagram, I'll get a message from somebody and they'll be like, Dan, I want to learn how to speak a British accent. Okay, great. Which one? And they're a bit confused, like, the British one. Well, there's no such thing as a British accent, mate. There's loads of them. There's at least 40 different British accents. So which one are you talking about? And a lot of people don't realise that. They just think that British English has the British accent and there's just one. And I'm here to tell you today, that is not true, my friend. And we're going to kind of delve a little bit deeper into British English accents because, like I said, there's loads of them. There's at least 40 different accents and they're all different. They're all hard in their own way. But if you're going to be the person that wants to live in England or work in England or, talk to British people, you're going to encounter a lot of these different accents. And if you're not prepared for it, you're going to have a very hard time communicating with people, So let's just start with what people think is the British accent. If you turn on the BBC News or you listen to the King of England talking or the Prime Minister or whatever, you're probably going to encounter what people think is the British accent. This is called a received pronunciation accent, or you often see people shorten it down to RP, the letters R and P. And this is what people think is a British accent. Everybody speaks correctly and they enunciate all of the words when they are speaking. Like this, But not everybody in England sounds this way. I don't sound this way. I don't speak like that. So what's going on? Am I not speaking in a British accent? Well, yeah, I am. I'm just not speaking in that British accent. So RP is what most people consider a British accent. And yes, it exists. Yes, it is used, but it's not everything, right? So I would say that the RP accent lives in the south of England. I mean, it does exist in other parts of the country, but basically you're going to find it in the south of England most of the time. And it does have some baggage that comes with it, to be honest. Some stereotypes that are attached to this accent that can be good, can be bad, just like any stereotype. For example, if I hear somebody speaking in this posh RP accent, I'm going to assume that they're rich, I'm going to assume that they're well educated, I'm going to assume that they're upper class. Now, they might sound like really good things to you, but I'm not interested in making friends with people like that. I'm from a working class area, and I tend to deal with people who are more on my level, whereas if I hear people who are upper class, there's a barrier between us, and it's going to be hard to make a relationship. I don't really want to get too bogged down in the British class system and what it means, but there's definitely a barrier there sometimes. So, it can be good, it can be bad. If you're trying to find examples of this kind of accent, I would say, the King, he speaks with an RP accent. If you turn on BBC News, you're probably going to hear this RP accent quite a lot. Famous English actors and musicians that go overseas, think Benedict Cumberbatch or Tom Holland. These guys have a really distinguished British accent. and they probably spent a long time learning that accent. What I would say about RP is that it's not as common as you think. Maybe in really formal situations, people will sound more like this, but in day-to-day life on the streets of Britain, you're not going to hear it that much. Most people don't speak in an RP accent in their daily lives. So what are you going to hear if you spend time on British streets? Well, depends where you are, mate. If you're in Scotland, in bonny Scotland, God, that was an awful impression. On my notes for this podcast, this is a bit of behind the scenes. I put a big comment at the top of my notes. Don't do impressions. And the first chance I've got, I've done an impression. So, failed that one. Anyway, Scottish people. They speak in a Scottish accent. And when I say Scottish accent, it's just like British English. There's no one specific accent for Scottish people. People in Edinburgh are not going to sound the same as people in Glasgow. But, Scotland's got its own variation and range of accents, right? We've also got Welsh people who, of course, live in Wales and they've got their own accents. We're from Wales. I don't know. In my head, that's how Welsh people sound. But even then, people in Wales are not going to all sound the same. Because, they've got their own language, Welsh. So some people just speak Welsh. But if they speak English, they're going to have their own unique accents. And that's cool. That's fine. Same if you hop over to Ireland. Irish people have got their own accents. Even people in the north and the south of Ireland sound really different. And that's cool. And if we jump back over to England and you think about just England, not the entire island, you can draw a line across the middle of the country. And the people in the north are going to sound very different to the people in the south. And I'll probably talk more in depth later in a different podcast episode about the differences between the north and the south. Even if we just talk about the north of England, it's quite a small area. You've got Yorkshire accents, where I grew up. You've also got Manchester and the Mancunian accent. And then about an hour away from that, you've got Liverpool and the Scouse accent. And the other side of the country, you've got Newcastle and the Geordie accent. And they all sound really, really different. Even though there's not much space separating us. Manchester, I'm from Manchester. I've got that really nasal Manchester accent. Is only about 40 minutes away from Liverpool, where they sound totally different. I'm from Liverpool, and what's going on? If you're an English learner, that is proper hard to get your head around, but it's not impossible, right? In the south of England, you've obviously got loads of different accents. Even within London, there's different accents. You've got your traditional Cockney, that people associate with East London, whereas, is it East London? I don't actually know. Cockneys are weird. They have to be born in a certain area and you can hear a bell when you're born and that makes you a Cockney. I don't really understand. But, for example, North London sounds really different to South London. So, even inside the same city, you get different accents, right? We've also got West Country, which is where everyone sounds like a farmer. And yeah, basically what I'm trying to say is that there are loads and loads of different accents in the UK, right? So what are the benefits for you of spending time learning these accents, right? Well, when I say learning, I don't mean to actually produce the same sounds. You don't need to speak in a British accent because you know what? And this is a bit of a tangent. This is not on my notes, but you don't need a British accent because you're not British. So it's okay. Everybody's accent is beautiful and it's unique and it's part of your identity. You don't need to change it. The only thing you need to do is make it clear so we can understand you. If you're pronouncing things so differently that we can't understand you, it's a problem. But just because it doesn't sound exactly the same as the people around you doesn't make it a bad thing. That makes it a good thing because it's unique and it's part of your identity. And that's beautiful and you don't need to change that. Anyway, when I say exploring these accents, what I mean is learning to understand them. Because people who live in different areas speak in different ways. And if you're not prepared for that, like if you spend your entire time listening to the RP accent and then you rock up in like Glasgow or Dublin or Cardiff or Newcastle, you're going to have a tough time because they don't sound like that at all. So if you want to be able to understand people, you're going to have to spend a bit of time learning and exploring these accents, right? And the benefits are you can understand more people. And if you're going to travel around England, it's much easier if you can understand how people talk in each area. It also is going to help you make a deeper connection with the people you meet because you're taking away one of those language barriers. If you're taking away the problems caused by their accent, you're much more likely to be able to build a stronger relationship with that person because there's one less thing in the way. And also, accents, because they're tied to each area. They've got their own history. They've got their own, I don't really know how to put their own baggage I mentioned earlier. And kind of understanding the baggage that comes along with these accents can help you understand culturally where they're coming from, right? There's also the idea that the stereotypes that go along with each accent. I'm going to talk about Yorkshire for a second because that's where I'm from. People see Yorkshire people as a bit thick, a bit stupid. You know, we're not very clever, but we're very honest and we're very down-to-earth people, you know. Not always true, of course. There's people from Sheffield who are very intelligent and there's people from Sheffield who are not down-to-earth. They're proper dickheads, but it's a mixed bag. But stereotypes will often do that kind of thing, which is one thing why you will always hear, if you live in England, right, and you call up a company to cancel, you know, like you want to cancel your phone, you want to cancel your internet, you almost always speak to somebody from Newcastle. And that's not an accident. It's related to their accent and how friendly and trustworthy they are. Anyway, what I'm saying is understanding these different accents will have benefits for you. But how? How do you actually learn these accents? And which one should you learn? Well, it's not that simple. Nothing is that simple. And it's all down to your individual case. There's no blanket answer that's going to cover everything. So the first thing you need to consider is your location, right? Which accent is the most useful for you where you are right now? If you're living in England and you're living, let's say, in Birmingham, there's no point learning a Newcastle accent, is there, right this second? No, you need to learn a Birmingham one because that's where you are. If you're living outside the UK, but you always talk to people from Liverpool, spend some time listening to the Scouse accent. It's going to help you out. So you need to think about your location and your interaction with British people. Sometimes that doesn't matter. Maybe you don't care about that. In that case, do you have a preference? Do you personally like a specific accent in the UK? If you do, learn that one. If for some reason you absolutely love the West Country accent, spend some time listening to that. I mean, I'm not sure if anybody does love that accent, but I'm joking. Of course, some people love it. You should also think about your communication goals. Like, this comes down to why are you learning British English in the first place? What are your goals for British English? What are you trying to do? And is there a specific accent that ties into that for you? Are you always talking to people from Yorkshire, for example? You know, something to think about. And another thing that you need to think about is how much information is available for the accent you want to learn. If you go on the internet and you look for like British pronunciation training, almost everything is RP. Almost everything. There's not that many people like me out there that are talking in their regional dialect and trying to explain their regional dialect. So if you want to learn, you know, Yorkshire English, for example, there's way less resources out there than if you're going to learn RP, right? So you need to think about how much support is there out there? How many people out there are making content that you can use to learn this accent, right? Otherwise, it might be really difficult. Maybe for some reason you love some really obscure British accent, but there's nobody talking about it. There's no textbooks, there's no materials. It's going to be bloody hard to learn that. So you need to think about that as well. But let's imagine that you've chosen a specific accent that you want to learn. You want to spend time listening to a specific accent, whatever it is that you've decided. How do you go about that part? Well, as just like learning anything, I would suggest online resources. And this could be, websites, it could be textbooks, it could be, whatever it is that you can find on the internet to help you understand this specific accent and how it works, right? You could also go one step further and look for authentic media. And when I say authentic media, obviously we need it to be spoken. We need to be able to listen to it. So whether it's a video or it's audio, you could try finding authentic media from that area. In the UK, BBC Radio has loads of different specific area radio stations. There's Radio Sheffield, there's Radio Leeds, there's Radio Norwich, whatever. And you can probably find access to that through the internet. If you go to the specific part of the BBC Radio website, you should be able to find some kind of authentic material. There's also a bunch of podcasts out there. You're listening to a podcast, find some other podcasts from that area and listen to them, right? That's good. And of course, if everything else fails, YouTube. There's always somebody out there on YouTube that's talking in the accent you want to listen to. So that's good. If you're in the UK and you want to spend time listening to specific accents, you could just go to that area. If you want to learn the Geordie accent in Newcastle, go to Newcastle and talk to Newcastle people. Newcastle people. Newcastleians. Well, Geordies, innit? We just say Geordies, but yeah. Go and talk to him and listen to him and see what's going on. That's another way you could do it. And of course, another option is private lessons or courses or some kind of interaction with a native teacher. If you want to learn Yorkshire accent for some reason, I'm your man. I'll sort you out and I'll teach you all about Yorkshire dialects and Yorkshire accents. But of course, I'm not just teaching Yorkshire. I'm a generalized teacher. I know how to teach. I can even teach you how to speak in RP if you would really like to learn such a thing. So it's something that people like me can help you with. Private lessons or online lessons or courses or whatever are really good because it accelerates everything. You can learn this stuff on your own. People were learning English way before I showed up. But the point of what I do is guidance and feedback. And that guidance and feedback makes the whole process quicker. So, this wasn't supposed to be an advert for my private lessons, but that's what it turned into. If you are interested, you can hit me up. It's britspeak.co/services. All the details are on there. Or you can just send me an email, So if you're interested in private lessons. But that is my little opinion, my overview of British accents. There's no such thing as one British accent. There's loads of them. And exploring them is really, really good. But it can be difficult depending on which accent you choose. So I'd love to know what you think. Do you have an accent that you really like? Is there an accent you really want to learn and why? Let me know. And while you're here, I also want to remind you to check out the other episode that's live now. There's episode 1, where if you haven't listened to it already, I'll tell you a bit about my story. And there's episode 3, what are the most used British slang words? So make sure you check them out. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, or you can go to britspeak.co/BritSpeakPod, britspeak.co/BritSpeakPod. The links are in the show notes. But thanks a lot for your time today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you in the next one. See you there.